LiSTNR production.
Hi, welcome to The Briefing. I'm Bension Siebert. A new study is shining a light on the drinking culture of a particular group of Aussies. It's not middle-aged blokes, it's not teens, it's working mums.
And so for the working mothers we spoke to, what they were really needing was increased support. We needed to address the gender division of labour, but instead of addressing those kind of systematic issues, it was marketed to them and they were targeted to believe that alcohol was almost the solution to these problems.
On today's deep dive, we speak to one of the study's authors about new concerns for middle-aged women and their attitudes to alcohol. First though, it's a public holiday where we're recording this in Victoria this Monday the 10th of June, so let's check in with the LiSTNR newsroom for the day's headlines.
Morning, it's Madeleine Larson here. The family of British TV presenter Michael Mosley have paid tribute after authorities confirmed his body was found on a Greek island. In a statement, his wife Claire has remembered him as a wonderful, funny, kind and brilliant husband. The 67-year-old is believed to have collapsed on a coastal walk while on holiday over there. Antonio's is a local cameraman who found Michael, telling Sky it was not clear in the first photos.
And we took a photo of the screen with an iPhone. We zoomed it in and you can clearly see there is a man lying down with his hand on his belly.
Peter Costello has resigned as Nine chairman just days after reports of a physical confrontation with a journalist at Canberra Airport. Nine has released a statement saying he's stepping down from the board effective immediately. The former federal treasurer denies the assault allegation, saying the journalist was walking backwards while filming and tripped. He says he was considering retiring sometime in July. Cricket great Glen McGraw and radio presenter Hamish are among the big names being recognised in today's King's Birthday Honours list. While former Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews and current WA leader Mark McGowan have received the highest honour, the Companion of the Order of Australia, both recognised for their service for their states and public health. And new warnings about the impacts of social media on kids' brains. One of the country's leading screen addiction experts says the repeated use of social media could cause brains to shrink and lose grey matter. Carlos Alcaraz has won the French Open men's singles title, overcoming Alexander Zverev in a 5-set marathon overnight. The 21-year-old Spaniard secured the victory 6-3, 2-6, 5-7, 6-1, 6-2 in 4 hours and 19 minutes. This is Alcaraz's third Grand Slam title, and he says it'll be Zverev's time soon.
I'm pretty sure that the tennis gives you the opportunity or the chance to win slams and to win this tournament very, very soon.
And in NRL overnight, the Panthers downed Manly 32-22.
Thanks to the LiSTNR News team. Coming up next, our chat on drinking culture among working mothers in Australia. Ever heard of mummy juice? It's a trope that's gathered steam online and is popular with a lot of working mums. It's another word for wine. The joke being that kids have their juice and the mums have their vino. Sounds innocent, but new research has revealed that there are concerns about how much working mothers are drinking and relying on alcohol to get through their days. While studies and reforms have often centred around boozy bloke culture, very little has yet been seen in the women's space. Maree Patsouras from the Centre for Alcohol Policy Research has been looking into the issue, and she joined The Briefing's Sacha Barbour Gatt, and she started by explaining what her study found.
With the women we spoke to, they talked about feeling overcommitted and experiencing a lot of time pressure. So in this context, they described they used alcohol, and this was something that they found both relaxing and enjoyable, but they also indicated using it as a way to cope or to escape at the end of their very full and demanding days. Working mothers in Australia also described feeling very under-supported, and surprisingly, this was the case for both single and partnered mothers. Particularly, they talked about the post-work routines. So this would include picking children up from school, getting kids ready for bed, cooking, and In this context, alcohol became sort of a prize or a reward. They described it as a way to recover from the day at work and to get through this kind of post-work routine. And women that felt the most under-supported, they described an increased desire to drink, and they would actually drink a little bit more. And often that alcohol use was more spontaneous and unplanned because they didn't feel they had that support with them.
Look, I've noticed that trend online quite a bit where it's, like mum juice and things like that, kind of normalising this idea that working mums or just mums in general need alcohol to get through the day. While I think the roots of it are innocent, is it harmful to see that idea perpetuated on social media?
When we spoke to our working mother participants, they described that alcohol was very normalised and it was very acceptable, not only around other working mothers, but around women in general. So they would give us examples of targeted advertisements and even just general media depictions, like in movies, where alcohol is presented to women as a solution to stress and problems. And specifically for mothers, it was presented as a solution to deal with child-related problems.
When you say in marketing, what sort of examples are you referring to there where that kind of stereotype might be perpetuated? Do you have examples of that?
Yeah, so they described examples of kind of user-generated content, so think Facebook groups. And they also described examples, for example, in the COVID-19 pandemic, they saw references to the pandemic in targeted advertisements, things like that.
Look, historically men have consumed more alcohol than women have, but now we're seeing this sort of increase in women's drinking. Can you tell us when drinking started becoming more popular with women?
Well, the women we spoke to, they described that it was very normal around their age group. So interestingly, we can see that alcohol use is decreasing for other younger cohorts, but around midlife women, it seems to be increasing. So there has been a recent surge of research looking at why that is. Our research looked at specifically working mothers. So we wanted to see the women that were taking on dual roles. And we were able to see it was a very complex reason as to why they drank. They described, like I said before, overcommitted, undersupported. They also described feeling like they were doing half a job as a parent and as a worker. And this also contributed to their alcohol use as well.
Are there any associated dangers with women drinking compared to men? Are there associated risks specifically for women when it comes to consumption of alcohol, or is it the same across the genders?
So women are more likely to experience alcohol-related harms for kind of longer-term risky drinking. So think breast cancer, that sort of a thing. And we also know that even if it's not long-term, alcohol use and mental health is a negative thing. And so for the working mothers we spoke to, what they were really needing was increased support. We needed to address the gender division of labour. But instead of addressing those kind of systematic issues, it was marketed to them and they were targeted to believe that alcohol was almost the solution to these problems without looking at kind of the structural, how we can fix that.
You mentioned it a little bit before. I want to talk a little bit more about the generations. So we're seeing an increase, or I suppose a decrease, in alcohol consumption among Generation Z. And they already are. This generation is having children and they're going through the same stresses and changes where the generations before them have perhaps turned to alcohol as a coping mechanism or as a way to get through the day. Are we expected to see those trends change as Gen Z pushes more into parenthood?
That's a really good question. I think as Gen Z pushes into parenthood, we'd have to look at Gen Alpha and see what the reason Gen Z is drinking less is more characteristic of things about their generation. So they tend to be more forward planning. They tend to be more future oriented. They talk a lot about not wanting to drink alcohol because they're very health conscious. They're actually one of the most health conscious generations. So as they become parents, it'll be interesting to see how Gen Alpha has grown up. Gen Alpha is unique as well because they're so technologically advanced. Gen Z is too, but Gen Alpha to a different degree. In one of my articles, we looked at the alcohol use in media and we were contrasting the fact that Gen Z was drinking less, but that's kind of not reflected in the media. In the media, we're seeing an overexposure of alcohol. So it'll be interesting to see as they become parents what Gen Alpha is exposed to and that contrast.
What needs to change in this space Or does it? Is it simply a generational factor that is just something that we're going to see and experience, and it's something that will change and evolve over time? Or do we need targeted strategies to address the reliance of alcohol in some women who are working mothers?
Definitely targeted strategies, especially for the different generations like we were talking before. For the midlife women, for the working mothers, in our research, we found that there may be a better need to regulate the role of alcohol marketing, especially as they described they felt targeted as women. We saw alcohol promoted as a tool to manage and cope, and this could be dangerous for the way they think about alcohol. And especially among the midlife women, like I was mentioning before, there may be a need to address the gender division of labor. So, for example, most women in our sample, whether they had partners or not, they described kind of being the default caregiver in their families. And this included, like I was saying before, the getting kids ready for bed, the cooking, being the emotional support for children. And even during COVID-19, they would describe taking on these additional responsibilities by default. So until we address this, it seems like a lot of reliance on alcohol is kind of related to both of those things.
Do you think this is a change in the conversation? I feel like for so long we have focused on men and their drinking habits and the need to regulate things like advertising during sporting games that are showed on TV. This feels like a bit of a switch in direction, and you mentioned it there, marketing alcohol towards that middle-aged woman group. The other thing, I guess the follow-up to that is, are we seeing governments engage in these conversations and saying, yeah, you know what, we see this as an issue and we need to change it?
So I think we're definitely seeing a shift. In fact, a lot of the women in our research were actually excited about the research. They were really interested in it. They wanted to know all the results. They were interested because they felt like it was quite underrepresented. And we can see in the recent years, there's been a surge of research, but that's only because we've now only noticed the trends that women have increased drinking. So if we had got in a little bit before, like what you said before, with the government help, maybe we could have prevented such an increase in drinking. And now we're kind of going at it after the fact, trying to see, well, why is this happening? Because it was so underrepresented for so long.
Maree, it's really interesting research and definitely given me food for thought. It's not something that I had necessarily considered, was that alcohol was being targeted or marketed specifically towards women who are falling into this group who feel like it's their reward, and it's definitely given me something to think about. So I appreciate your time today and for talking us through your research.
Thank you.
Maree Patsouras there, speaking with the Briefing's Sacha Barbour Gatt. That's all for this morning's podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to check your feed again this afternoon from 3 for the next episode of The Briefing. And if you found today's ep useful, please share it with a friend. I'm Bension Siebert. Catch you next time.
LiSTNR.